there was, in the back of it, there was two courtyards. In one of the courtyards there, one of the buildings there, lived my father's older brother, the uncle, my two married sisters. Everybody in the family that married got an apartment. I don't think they paid rent. One night, after midnight, in November, also in November, knock on the door, two German uniformed, not SS, not the Gestapo, like policemen. You have 15 minutes to get dressed and whatever you can carry with you, like two married sisters, husbands, children. My sister Fella's baby boy was about 3 months old at the time. Everybody assembled within 15 minutes, and they marched us, meaning everybody that lived in the apartment house, plus next building and the following building and so forth. Everybody on the sidewalk marching under the German gun.
Okay.
What can you carry with you? Next to nothing. Next to nothing, really. What can you carry with you? So we walked for about no more than 50 yards. Some German car drove up, gets out there and says, stop it, the trains are full. The trains are full. And everyone that was marching with the Germans, we went back into the house. What a relief, okay? Came to the house, next morning my father said this, oh yeah, they said that tomorrow we're gonna take you. In other words, the trains at this particular point are full, tomorrow is gonna be our turn. Next morning my father said, this is it. He had one of his sisters that lived in the area where he came from Vlošťova. But this was a village about 10 miles from Vlošťova. A village, a tiny village, name of the village is Venglešin. Venglešin. We're leaving. We are not going to wait now for them to take us. Who the heck knows where we're going to go. We loaded up everything into we rented horse, buggy, my parents, my married sisters, myself, my younger sister, the entire family on this here thing. We took with us the Gentile Polish live-in maid so that when we crossed the border, because Germany took part of Lodz and incorporated it into the Reich, into the Germany proper. They had some sort of a border. And we gave her the money or any valuables, whatever we had to carry. But we loaded up there pillows, anything. And my father had the presence of mind to take with him a sewing machine. And we made it there. After we passed the border, the maid went back to live in our home and still sell shoes from the inventory.
What was
She
her
was a
name?
loyal,
What was her
devoted
name?
maid. Her name was Vladja. She was a loyal, devoted maid. Was with us for years, like a member of the family. And she would be selling shoes, and whenever she had a chance, she would forward some money to us, because the store was loaded with goods. We left, we didn't have any cash, so to speak of. There was an apartment house, there was the business, but didn't have any ready cash. So anyway, we made it to this Venglešin, and our family, they took us in with open arms. My father's sister,
And what was her
she
name?
had a husband, her name Leah. her husband Yitzhak, and now their children, it's important to the story, their children was, their oldest son was Adam, or Abba, Adam. Next in line there was a sister that wasn't there any longer. She also made it with her husband to the Soviet zone. Her name is Yanka. She's in Orlando, Florida now. Her name is Yanka.
And what was the family name?
Bach, her husband from Bach. And they already had it made before we arrived. They made it to the Soviet side. Next in line was Esther. Although my sister, the younger sister, Edja, and she were named for the same grandmother, I'm going to refer to her as Esther and to my sister as Edja, because both survived. And there was a younger boy who must have been at the time 15 or 16, Joseph. This was the family. In other words, it was Adam, Yanka, Eshu, Joseph. Okay?
And what did you do there?
In this village, we mentioned this, there was no electricity, there was no paved road, there was a godforsaken place out in nowhere. And we lived there with the family. My father set up the sewing machine, and some shoemakers would come into him, and be Papua starting. Everything was, there was no thing as cash, change of cash. It was either for potatoes, or for bread, or for flour, this sort of thing, because that's what the farmers had. And it was war. It was wartime. We didn't complain. But we were beginning to believe that it was the right choice. I mean, where the heck are the Germans going to come here? I mean, no road, nothing. I mean, in the fall, the rains and the roads were impossible. In 1941, well, in 1940, actually, in 1940, there was a proclamation that all Jews between, I don't remember, 15 or 16 to 62 should register. In 1941, in June, my cousin Joseph, the 16-year-old boy, and myself were taken with other youngsters in the village to a place, Lipnica, Lipnica, which was in the area there, really. It was no more than about 4 or 5 kilometers, about 3 miles from where we lived, in this Beglishen, right? There were no guards, no German or Polish guards for that matter. All we had there was Polish engineers and technicians, and we were put to work into irrigation, sort of. We would dig canals so that the water would pass to the farming area. Mostly what we did is deepening and widening the small river that was going through the farming land. All more or less was revolved against the irrigation idea about benefiting the local farmers. They put up a barracks for us, a very primitive one. There was a barbed wire around us, but as I said, there was no guard.
So who was in charge?
Who was in charge? From the district town of Jendrzejów, which was the main town, about 22 or 25 kilometers from this place. There was already at that time like maybe a ghetto established, and there was a Jewish police, and 2 Jewish policemen, very nice guys, would come over there, supposedly watch over us. It was nothing. It was very, very free. Okay?
Do you remember their names?
No. One was Garfinkel. And you know why I remember the name. This was so we started there June 41. I would say we were about 50, roughly. The work was immensely hard because we were staying there for 12 hours in the water, barefooted, rolled up to here, shoveling this wet sand, the wet sand, into wheelbarrows. The wheelbarrows, they had boards lined up the slope and away. Very hard work. Very hard work. But I think it helped me personally that I was active in sports and the gym before the war. I think that this helped. And after a week or two, somehow I got used to it. And it really didn't bother me that much except the cold, especially in the mornings. Yeah. Well, this was in June 41. And we worked at this very hard labor. Okay. The only thing that did bother us there was there was absolutely no sanitation at all. For latrines, we dug a hole in the ground, with a plank of wood across it. It was a very primitive kind of life. But on the other hand, what helped us was that these barracks was situated among the local farmers. So we did not feel any hunger. We did not have the particularly nourishing foods, but the basics, the staples like potatoes, milk, and flour or breads, we didn't lack for that at that time.
And the local farmers were kind to you?
Well, in a way, yes. We paid them for it, and that's how we managed. But again, as I remember it now, we didn't complain in the least because there was a war on. And we always thought now that England and France, are going to destroy the Germans in no time. It was just a question of just surviving. So this was going on until 1942, the later part of 1942. Between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, my family, meaning my parents and Aunt Leon and her family, were notified that in, let's say, in 2 days from now, at 8 o'clock in the morning, whatever you can carry with you to be outside of the house. They're going to be deported, what they were told, to the east. Make sure that you take all your valuables. Make sure that you take all the warm clothes because it gets very cold there. And so forth and so forth.
Now, how did you know that since you weren't with them?
We occasionally sneaked home to get wear underwear or something like that. It was only 3 miles. This Lipnitsa from Bangladesh was only about 3 miles. And this was out in nowhere. There was no sight of any Germans there. No sight. The next paved road was about 8 kilometers away. In fact, joining the Jędrzejów to Włoszczowa, where my father comes from. So occasionally we would get home. So when we heard about this new decree, about this new edict, we got home.
How did you hear it? Who told you? Who told you
We
about
were,
the decree?
we were in contact. We were in contact with the family.
So
we
they
were-
sent a letter or something?
One time my cousin Joseph would go home, once I would go home. We were in contact with them. We knew what was going on. When I came home, and my father was despondent, he didn't have a good feelings about it at all. But again, where are we going to go? It was a hostile environment. It was a hostile environment. There was no place to go. Now, my father gave me a little container, like from shoe polish. I can't see. Little like shoe polish container with some family jewelry. As I found out later, he did the same thing with my youngest sister, Edja. She also received something like that. Looking back, it seems to be that my father realized that this was the end of the line. Okay, so my parents, my married two sisters with their children, my older sister's children, Rose and Nathan, 11 and 7, and Fela, at the time the boy was 3 years old. His name was Michash, Michael. He was already named after my grandfather. So my grandfather passed away in about 1936 or 37. So my sister Edja and my cousin Adam, the oldest son of my Aunt Leah's, I should have mentioned before, they married about 5 months prior to that. They were married. And my cousin's sister, Adam's sister Esther, right? You know our Leah's daughter Esther? The three of them somehow had an offer from one of the Gentiles in the village. He was the principal of school, or the principal of school was a family friend, that he is going to hide them. After the deportations, of course, at the deportation time, the Germans proclaimed that any Gentile found hiding a Jew or helping a Jew or feeding a Jew, any sort of help whatsoever, the entire family will be shot, executed. After a few days, so many people, younger people especially, were hiding out. They didn't want to be deported, only like the parents and so forth. Or parents with small children, where are they going to go? So Adam, my younger sister Edja, and Esther are going to hide out. After the news came that certain Polish Gentile families were actually executed, the family that was supposed to hide them got cold feet. So now there were no more Jews residing at all. The only Jews still alive were the ones that were confined either in the barracks, working forced labor, or if there was a ghetto established someplace. But there was no Jew living any place anymore. It was what they called Judenrein. Okay?
Do you remember what the last things you said to your family were?
Okay. So now Joseph and I are working in this forced labor camp, and the three of them, Edja and her husband Adam and my cousin Esther, his sister, are out in nowhere in the fields, in the woods. spoke to the chief engineer. I remember his name. Name was Chichura. Chief engineer. I had a pretty good rapport with him. I pleaded with him that I would like to get him into the camp. It was like Noah's Ark. There was a flood, and this was it. He said, okay. Adam, John, and Esther came in there. Other people that were there did the same thing. They also had some people that were supposed to have been hiding out and it didn't work out. Brought them in. From about 50 people, it swelled up to about 90 to 100 or so. So again, bad part of it was that we were full of lies there, and we worked very, very hard, unbelievably so, but we didn't have any hunger. And this was going on up to about a month later. Joseph and I and another 20 people or so were transferred a few miles away, about 2 miles away. And the living quarters, so to speak, the living quarters, was a storefront and a small tiny apartment that was empty from a deported Jewish family. We slept on the floors, and what we did there was they put us to work in the quarry, digging rocks and stones or whatever. This chief engineer assigned me the job of being in charge of the equipment. In other words, in the morning when the crew would go out to work, the tools and the equipment, I would hand it to them, and I would be responsible to make sure that nothing is missing when they came back. That was one chore. The other responsibility was that there was one girl that remained there that was a cook, to cook for them when they came home from work. And I was the one that was in charge of the produce, what do you call it, potatoes and whatever the ingredients is that go into the pot. I was supposed to give her this many this and this much this and so forth. This was my job, because this chief engineer really liked me. So of course, as far as I was concerned, I did not have to work hard. I stayed in there. I was me, the cook. Her name is Hanka Yakubovich. She lives in Queens. One of the crew members there, about a 20-year-old fellow, had a brother who was about 12 years old, and he was too young to go to work. And he was also hiding out from the deportation. The older brother supposedly was his guardian. So this boy, the 12-year-old boy, stayed with us. He wasn't legal there, but he stayed with us. We weren't afraid of it. As I said, there was never any Germans or Polish police coming there. It was a godforsaken place. And this boy was hanging out there and around, in the thing, hanging around there, doing whatever he wanted to do, until his brother came home. One day, a German staff car pulls up in front of this the structure. It was a front store. This man that was deported, that we lived in, had a grocery or something. A staff car pulls up there, and the chief of the SS of the entire district, who was responsible for all these deportations, a very hefty, about 350 pounds guy. His name was Bruhl, B-R-U-H-L, with a driver who also served as the bodyguard. He couldn't have been more than 19 years old in the SS uniform. As they pulled out, the little boy was in the vicinity of the window. And when he saw this German car pulled up, he bolted for the back door and hid in the outhouse. There was a little outhouse about 20 feet from this thing. This German young fella noticed someone running or a silhouette or something. It's difficult to believe that from the outside looking in that he noticed something. He ran in like a wild man out to the back door, and all you could hear is one shot. And he executed this boy in one shot. And he came in running through the back door again. By that time, this chief assessment, the head of assessment, was already near me. And he was talking to me, what we're doing here, in a very polite manner. What we're doing here, and this, and how do I manage with this, how do I manage with this. And this young assessment runs in with his pistol still in his hand and ready to shoot me. And this chief assessment, who was responsible for the deportation of 100,000 people, motioned to him, like, don't. And they left. And they left. Well, I have to tell you what his father came home and all that. I don't want to go into details. This was the experience with them there. Okay, go ahead.
Do you know what happened to your family, to your parents and your two sisters? Do you know where they were deported to?
Well, we found out soon later that the entire family, my mother also had a sister and a husband and 3 children that followed us from Lodz to this area. My father's younger brother, whom I didn't mention yet, Mordecai Joseph, he also was from Lodz and came back to Włoszczowa. Everybody came back to the roots, you know. Felt they're going to be more comfortable there. All of them went to Treblinka.